Welcome to the Aquest Podcast, conversations about regs, funds, and governance with your host, Daniel Lawlor.
Hello, Shannon. Welcome to the Aquest Podcast 2020 End of Year Review. Great to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. I'm a co-host on this show, but I haven't been on the last 7, 8?
No, we've run amok in your absence.
We have run amok.
Tell me this, do you think there is anybody out there who is not looking forward to the end of 2020?
Oh, sweet Lord.
Maybe the inventor of Zoom.
Maybe the inventor of Zoom. Good one. I'm counting down like a week Friday. That's it. Shops wrapped up. If you're closing on the 18th of December and coming back on the 4th of January, it is 2.5 weeks of
chocolate sweets and wine,
whiskey and boxing, and it doesn't matter. Whatever you need for 2.5 weeks, it's heaven. So, yeah.
Wake up, and it'll all be over.
I love how optimistic we are. I mean, nobody knows or nobody believes it's actually going to happen. But for the next 2.5 weeks, we can pretend that we'll all go back to normal.
It's been a tricky year, certainly, and I don't think anybody will be sorry to see the back of it.
It's been, tricky is a good word.
Well, let's reflect back on how we started the year. And you've just reminded me of this because as I get older, Shannon, it all fades into one. But we did publish our 2020 predictions at the start of the year.
We did.
And
I love it.
I haven't looked at them, so you're going to surprise me with what was in there. I'm sure COVID wasn't in there.
No.
And everything else has kind of flown from that. So I don't know how any of these are close to the mark.
I think you'd be pleasantly surprised that you did well. You know, your comments on the regulator relationship at an arm's length, the whites of the eyes. I mean, we've all seen that come to pass this past year. Fitness and probity, CP86 inspections. You talked about the changing landscape of the Irish funds industry. You were quite blatant with your bye-bye SMICs idea.
Well, let's take a few of them. So CP86, we did have the thematic review. It did conclude there is now an expectation of at least 3 full-time employees or equivalent. I know that there are some questions about where that leaves SMICs. In my mind, it leaves SMICs in a position where they have to have 3 FTEs, whether they are direct employees, which brings its own challenges, but more likely designated persons who are seconded for a period of time with the support team that are seconded for a period of time, and all of which adds up to at least 3 FTEs. So I remain convinced that that model is going to be tricky to operate with that level of resources, and for the most part, we're going to see them migrate to either their own management company or a third-party management. And I know there's, notwithstanding the letter, there's still some lack of clarity and people looking for guidance, which is, I guess, understandable, but I don't see that changing.
You called it on Brexit.
Well, I think that's the only one I can remember, and I think I called it by saying I have no idea what's going to happen. And we wrote that in December last year, I think December 2019. And today is the 10th of December 2020. Our friends, the Prime Minister and Ursula von der Leyen, have just had their dinner last night, and we still have no idea what the outcome is going to be. So that was right. And give us another 21 days, and I don't think we will know until the very death of the year what is going to happen.
So the 2020 predictions, they were fun because within weeks of that going out, of course, March 15th hit and the world ended as we know it.
The world changed. The world changed an awful lot. So I think, having said that, things like the relationship with the regulator at the arm's length, that's definitely been seen, and you can see that as having been a trend, and let's call it out, an issue in a lot of instances over the year. And it ebbs and flows. So that's definitely played out. You talked about, the regulator wants to see the whites of the eyes of senior management. I've seen that numerous times throughout the year. We do preparatory mock interviews with people who are going to have a direct engagement with the central bank.
Yeah, we that's been really consistent. Even your man from last month that we did that mock interview for. He had a bit of a rough time in the opening of the interview, and then it tended to lean in his favor. But it was very much arm's length, whites of the eyes, no free hits.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
you
want
called
to
it.
see senior management. They don't want to see advisors.
Or, yeah.
They will ask tough questions. They will give you a hard time. And that is fine because you're embedded in the business. You will know how it runs day to day. But it's fine if you're prepared and you have a good feel for what's to come and you're ready. If you go in thinking it's tea and biscuits and next thing the thumb screws are put on and the lights shine in your face, you can get a bit of a nasty surprise. And that's when you might find an outcome from a meeting that's disappoints you and it leaves you in a more difficult place. So we've seen that play out absolutely over the year, and we'll continue to see that into next year in terms of how the regulator engages and who they want to engage with and how they want to engage. And COVID hasn't changed that terribly. Those meetings still happen, albeit that they happen virtually. But you're still outnumbered. You're still there on your own to stand your ground and put forward your position and engage and build that relationship with the regulator as best you can.
We didn't dip our toe. We kind of went wading in the kids' pool over in the reg tech space. That showed up on our radar. We had a lot of good fun with rating software. Brian Walsh over.
Yes, that's right.
Where is he? Over in Donnybrook.
They're in town.
They're in town. Yeah.
Lord knows where they are at the moment, but their office is in town. Yeah. So we had a podcast with Brian early in the year where he had his own take on some of the predictions that we had. Yeah. So that was fun.
It was great.
Yeah. And I think predictions, like everything, you're leaving yourself hostage to fortune.
And in fairness, I think he punched 3 big fat holes in that technology section of the 2020 predictions, which was great. He had some smart opinions on it. We went and did a few things with the impact of COVID and leadership, leading from a distance with Mark Fritz.
Yeah.
He's got some interesting insights there.
He does. And I guess, we looked at early days of deployment of work from home, and you could see that cyber would be a very big issue.
Oh, yeah, sextortion and cyber security.
Yeah. And then you would look at, well, what can I learn from the experience of deploying my staff from home? Is this a model that's feasible going into the future? Do I really need an office space with 100 desks for 100 people, or maybe I don't? But on the flip side, how do we manage and lead teams when we don't see each other physically? How do we integrate new staff? How do we recruit? How do we look after our juniors and give them a decent experience, both in terms of learning the ropes and developing experience, but also the social side of it and that aspect. And Mark was great, particularly in the leadership side. I think we did that podcast way earlier in the year, and all of that is still playing out.
Yeah.
I think firms at that stage were still kind of in firefighting mode, and although working from home has proved seamless is probably overstating it, but it's been functional and it's worked and it's done the job. I think until we start to get to a position where people can start to think about going back to offices, then you got to make choices about, well, do we go back to an office? And if we go back to an office, how much do we go back? And how do we try and learn and reap the benefits of what we've learned now and be a smarter, slimmer business into the future? And I think maybe when we did the pod on that this year, we're probably ahead of the game. I don't think firms were in a space yet to think about that or make decisions on it until they had choices. And I think next year they will have choices. And that'll be an interesting space. And so we may well chat again with Mark and see.
Sam Glynn was on one of those episodes. Jennifer Cahill from Savvy, we had her out looking at the impact of COVID on the different areas of the business.
Yeah, and recruitment has still happened. There was a slowdown and then there's been a pickup. But firms have not stopped recruiting just because they're working from home, albeit if you are a new member of staff and you've never physically met any of your colleagues, that's tough. And particularly if you're junior and, a lot of the learning experience, I think back to my early career, was sitting in the office with the partner as they kind of went about their business, and you pick an awful lot up from just listening to what's going on and asking questions. And you don't have that the same in this work from home. So correcting that into next year is going to be.
I also want to throw out, we did an interesting podcast with Adrian Whelan under, I guess, the governance umbrella on, I think we called it a special edition.
This was about Project Accent or Protect Accent.
Protect Accent campaign.
Yes.
Yeah, that was very cool. And I've had some interesting feedback just in the last 2 weeks on it, actually. In conversations, Adrian's name got mentioned, and they're like, "Oh, I heard that podcast that he did with Denny." So it's good to see that that's still playing out. And I think that might even get threaded into a project we're doing next year on governance over at FIMSI.
I would be surprised if it doesn't make an appearance. Yes.
Yeah, very good. That was back in May or June of 2020.
Right. Well, you reflect now on what happened over the year, and I guess COVID kind of immediately jumps to mind. And then after that, it all blurs. But actually, there was a lot done over the course of the year.
We brought up the investors advocate, Bob Quinn.
Yeah, we did a series, and we must give Bob a shout. I have him in line for something else. Bob Quinn is the investors advocate. He's a very interesting guy, and I'm really keen to chat to somebody from an investor's perspective, because although we have a very large financial services industry here and we have trillions in assets under administration and management, very few of the investors are here. So when you look at initiatives and when you're promoting ESG or you're promoting the use of key investor documents and what have you, the noise here is always from what's good from an industry perspective and a manager's perspective, and not so much from an investor's perspective. So I was interested to get Bob in. So we've had a couple of chats. We picked that back up next year
Bob.
as well.
I would, if I were to label him, and I don't want to normally, but I would put him in a renegade box. Like, this is a guy who is opinionated. He has a view on the world that probably isn't the most popular, but he's very comfortable shouting it and declaring it and doing all sorts with it. I mean, there's no status quo in his space.
I think he because of the space he operates in, yeah, he has a very different view. Like he is a skeptic, I think.
That's a good word. A contrarian.
Yeah. And so, if you say, oh, yeah, ESG is great, everybody's plowing into ESG, his view, I hope I don't misrepresent him here, but it's like, well, prove to me that these are actually businesses that take ESG seriously, and that this isn't just a fad or a label that you're putting around something.
Another marketing gimmick.
And also, if you're selling this to me or you're running this fund, but I see that you don't take ESG seriously in your own business, your carbon footprint is massive, you fly all over, all this kind of stuff, then that leads me to think that this is nonsense and not something that is anything more than a sales pitch.
Yeah. So,
Bob has plenty of opinions and is well worth listening to.
And following on Twitter, for that matter, Bob Quinn, themoneyadvisors.ie is where you'll find him.
Friend to the housewives of County Kildare. Say no more. Tune into the podcast and find out what that means.
Oh, take it out of context. It's okay. Let's. Is it too soon to talk about FIMSI?
I just want to mention Sam Glynn. So we did a series of videos.
7 Minute Cyber. God, he's great, isn't he?
He's a good guy.
One of my favorites.
They were over on Sam's channel. I think actually, in fairness, we put them out through both channels. But
7 Minute Cyber. Did you guys ever stick to 7 minutes?
Well, we had an alarm that would ring.
You had to put ish on the end.
Yeah, we had an alarm that would ring around 6 minutes, but he just liked to chat. What could I say? I tried. To chat. I tried. No, he's a good guy, because I said, when you take COVID, we went into COVID, and one of the questions was, well, how do I ensure cybersecurity and protection? And around that time, you had the central bank had issued a Dear CEO letter to investment firms about cybersecurity, so it was clearly on their agenda, and it's something that's continually come up again and again. So it was good to tune in to somebody who's in this space. We talked an awful lot. Like, it is very interesting stuff, because for the most part, it is not super criminals and government agencies with millions.
It's naive employees opening emails.
It's still an email, or it is a call, or it's social engineering, or it's something that gets you to engage, and next thing you know, you've clicked a fake link and they're in, and they might sit there and watch what you're doing for a period, and next thing they'll intervene and they'll change the bank transfer details on a wire transfer, or something sneaky like that. They're clever people, the cyber criminals, and keeping up with them is a challenge. But it was funny how much of it was pretty basic, straightforward stuff, and not supercomputers.
what I appreciate about Sam is deeply practical and very easy to understand his narrative in all facets of cyber. So considering he's a super tech guy.
He's a techie guy, but he
he's
actually
proper tech. But he
can string two sentences together.
In such a way that, even, I'm not going to say the numpties in the room from a tech perspective, Danny, but you and I were able to completely follow and understand.
Non-techies, that's what we've got ourselves. Non-techies. Yeah, no. Sam's a very easy guy to listen to and engage with. And from my perspective, when you look at cyber and tech and you look down the tracks, chief information officers, a new PCF role, new pre-approved control function for regulated firms. So they got to think about, the regulator is sending a message with that says, firms are increasingly using tech, which is fine. It just changes the risks, but hopefully does bring benefits. But you got to think about this right the way up through the chain, and it's got to make its way to senior management. And it's not enough to rely on HQ having cyber or having the tech functionality responsibility. You've got to have a handle on this within your own business here in Ireland. And it's got to be somebody at a senior level. So they're flagging that. I think the natural progression for this is that in due course, maybe not 2021, but not far after, you will start to see INEDs appear with cyber and tech expertise, and you will start to see financial services firms that have at director level expertise from that perspective. Now, they may be INEDs, they may be part of the business, they may be executive, but I think you're going to start to see cyber and tech make its way right to the top of organizations, because it's just too much of a risk to ignore. And it's quite foreign for non-techies. We want to tune out, but I think there's comfort in having somebody with that skill set on the board. We're going to see that.
Next, FIMSI.
FIMSI, yes. Finance Ireland Minicon 2020. We did it the topic was CP86. We ran it in October, yes we did. Over 5 days, 5 2-hour sessions. It was a marathon.
I don't want to talk about it.
Organization and logistics were a
marathon. Well, so first of all, in case anyone just picked up that you called it Finance Ireland Minicon, it is changing from Funds Ireland to Finance Ireland Minicon. Still FIMSI though.
I was going to just let that lie. I was going to point that out, Shannon. Anyway, it is, because I think as we look at the topics we want to cover in 2021,
they lend themselves.
Yes, some of them are industry specific to funds, but some of them are broader than that. So it'll be more FIMSI next year, but some of the topics will be a broader focus. So we chat about that in a second. But the CP86 FIMSI was a lot of work to organise, but it was great, and the feedback on it made it worthwhile. I guess, given that everybody and everything was done virtually this year and doing a virtual minicon, we wanted it to stand out and be something that people could engage with and enjoy, and that was different.
Edutainment was where I was going with this. I just don't think that because you're a very staid, status quo, technical, dry sector, that your events need to play into that. So we took some liberties, we had some fun, we edutained as best as we could, and for our
Have you just invented that word?
Education and entertainment simultaneously mushed together. I'm sure I'm not the first. I'm sure there's other people who've hacked those
edutainment. Well, I like it. And that is what it was, because we did, we were just a bit innovative in how we sliced and diced the sessions. We had not a PowerPoint or other presentation in sight, very much interview and interaction based, and then drawing as much questions as we could handle out of the audience. And we had plenty.
We had 11 pages of lessons learned and things to do better for our next go of it. But for the first go, I thought, Jesus, we did good.
It was good. And if the next one is 11 pages better, 11 pages of comments better,
so much better.
It'll be even better again. So it was cool. And again, thank you to our partners on that. We had Mazars, the AMX, Convergence, and Dylan Eustace all partner with us on the CB86 Minicon and come and manage sessions and deliver content. And it was good. It was good fun. So in 2021, we will be running some more FIMSIs. I know the first one will be in February, and it's on ESG, because we know in March we have a deadline for a set of disclosure rules around ESG. So we want to spend a little bit of time on that in the first FIMSI of the
Are we
year.
inviting Bob to participate in that particular Q&A?
I don't know. He might upset the crowd too much.
No, that's what we need. Friction is the way to get into a better position.
Well, let's see if Bob has time.
Bob,
in his diary.
Quinn, I'll be inviting you to this FIMSI. We'd love to have you in the audience for Q&A. Keep these presenters and experts on their toes.
So ESG first, and then after that, we have some irons in the fire. Certainly the continued focus on fitness and probity. We've got
governance. Andrea Dermody. I just want to bring her up. She's doing some great work. I've been going through some of her material on D&I, and there will be a mini series on, I don't know if we're going to do D&I and culture and behavior and constructive challenge all in the same boat.
We'll figure that out, but certainly, it continues to be an issue that the regulator is concerned with. They have again issued a letter on fitness and probity. So for anybody who's reading the tea leaves here, if they have to issue a letter more than once on the same topic, you can tell that they are not pleased. And you don't continually issue letters. You move up, you start to use different tools in your armory. If people won't listen to a DRCO letter, well then you go down an admin sanction.
Well, it's interesting that Dermody, Diversity and Inclusion, is a consulting firm. They were a prize at the FIMSI event.
Oh, that's right, yes.
And we actually had 3 people try and negotiate their prizes out of what they had to get the group think 45-minute training for the board.
Yeah.
So I think, one tiny piece of data and insight, but people are really interested in.
I think there's 2 sides. And one side is I'm interested because I believe in it. And the other side is I'm interested in it because the regulator seems to believe in it. And therefore it must be important.
I'd say 95% of the industry is only interested because the CBI is about to pull a gun on them.
Well, yes, I think that there are still plenty who do it out of obligation rather than seeing it as a value add or something that
that's fair.
Should be done. So I think a FIMSI might try and grasp that nettle and see is there more to it than virtue signaling. I think that's the
virtue signaling. Yeah, that would be the word.
Term.
I don't know. I think until people start to really understand why it's important to their unique situation and hierarchy of values and the way they see the world, it will have to stay virtue signaling. Because there's a gap right now between the Central Bank of Ireland mandating a vested interest in it and people really understanding why.
Yes, I think what will drive it, though, is the regulator continues to publish information on and talk about gender diversity at board level.
The radar.
But they've also said that after 9 years, we do not think you're independent. So you are required to have an independent chairperson to carry out the OE role, independent chairperson or director. You do need independence on the board, and it is good practice, and it's required by for example, the Irish Funds Corporate Governance Code. So that's going to prompt a rotation and a movement in the.
I think it'll stay on the radar.
Some of the
I just don't think it's going to shift it from virtue signaling to meaningful transformation in the firm until we've closed the gap of why it's important and why there's merit to your individual firm personal agenda board people. So until that, it'll remain virtue signaling.
It will, but we'll grab that. We'll grab that nettle in a FIMSI, I think. And the other topics, I'm pretty sure we'll do a FIMSI on the investment limited partnership amendments and private equity opportunities in Ireland, because we can see that on the legislative side, the IIP Act amendments are making their way through the process. And there seems to be some momentum behind it. On the regulator side, we see that they have published for consultation some amendments to their rulebook. So not only will you have a vehicle that will work, you will have a you will have a regulatory regime that's sensitive to the differences between a closed-ended private equity fund compared to everything else. So you will have some very good tools there for setting up and running PE funds and VC funds. So that's going to be a topic next year as well, I think.
Are we done?
We're nearly done. I think the other one, I'm going to throw it out there. I think there's an interesting FIMSI to do on digital assets and on cryptocurrencies, because we've got the markets in crypto assets draft regulation as it stands, and it is an area where there's potential, massive potential for growth. I think, and this is my theme for next year, if I were in this space and I was thinking of establishing in Europe or running a European business, I would want to get that up and running now. I would want to get it up and running before the regulation comes into effect, because I can do it and design my governance, all my frameworks around what's in the draft regulation, but I don't have to go and get authorized. And there'll be a grandfathering period under the new rules. So you'll probably have 2 years to be up and running and testing and trying to operate a business like this without actually being subject to the regulator's gaze. So I'd be inclined, I was in this space, to try and get in now or get up and running before the regulation comes in, knowing that you can operate to that standard, learn from others that have to go through an authorization process. There's a lot of wins in that. So I think we'll have a privacy on that as well. Wow, a lot planned for next year.
A lot. What would you say, just as we wrap up, what are the 2 or 3 takeaways that you have from 2020 personally as a direct result of COVID?
Number 1, I know staycation and all that, but as soon as the opportunity arises, I'm getting jabbed and I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to some sunshine for some proper heat. Second, I think that having to work from home has really opened up opportunities around, for example, with the podcasts. Before this, we always did podcasts. We were physically in a room with the guests. Now we've done many podcasts with people where we've been thousands of miles apart. And I think we'll continue to do that. Likewise, delivering training and a lot of the consulting and advisory that we do, we do that virtually, through calls and Zoom meetings and what have you. So I can see that continuing next year, and I have ambitions that our podcast guests, our net will be cast very broad on that as well. So I can definitely see that as something that we see a lot of next year as well. Is that good enough?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, thank you.
So for 2021, I think we will see, as I said, on the podcast side, broader net. I think in terms of the environment here and the business here, I think you're going to see financial stability and investment funds really become well understood as being an area that requires attention by industry. I think the regulator has been beaten on about it for a little while now, but I think industry is going to catch up on that, and that's mostly around liquidity risk management and leverage. So we're going to see that continue to be a theme next year. We've got the AIFMD consultation with the commission that closes at the end of January. I don't see that moving miles next year in terms of draft regulations coming out, but let's see. And then lastly, Brexit.
No comment. We just no comment.
No comment. And finally, on CB86, the action plans are due to be finalised end of March. I think that's going to cause quite a lot of angst and action. I think that the plan that's agreed needs to be one that doesn't then require a whole other set of meetings to put into place what third-party manco we're going to use, or whatever solution we've agreed on, to start then in part 2 looking at how we're going to do it. I think the action plan has to not only be what our preferred solution is, but how we're going to achieve it. So I think there's an awful lot in that, and I know that some are waiting for further guidance from the regulator. I don't think that's going to stop the clock. So I would personally advise firms and SMICs and everybody else to crack on, because the time and the window gets shorter and shorter, and I don't see the regulator extending it, even if it takes them another 2 or 3 or 4 weeks or however long to produce what other piece of guidance they're going to produce, if any. So crack on is my message on that one. And on that, I'm going to wrap up. That was 2021.
No, that was 2020.
Well, there you go. That's the effect that 2020 has had on me.
That was 2020.
That was 2020. I am pleased that 2020 is over, and I look forward to 2021.
Yeah. If I had a whiskey, I would drink to that right about now.
Cool. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you, podcast listeners. We wish you all a great Christmas and holiday season and a wonderful new year, and look forward to catching up and engaging and maybe actually seeing people in person in 2021. So in the meantime, take care and have a great Christmas break. Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to the Aquest Podcast with me, Danny Lawlor. If you're new to the Aquest Podcast, do hit the subscribe button on whatever your preferred platform for receiving podcasts is, and make sure to hit the like button if you like and enjoy the podcast. This is the last Aquest Podcast of 2020, and thank goodness for that. I'm pretty much done with the year, and I think everybody else is as well. So we look forward to wrapping it up over the next few weeks and then getting into 2021 with a fresh perspective and hopefully lots of good things to look forward to. For this episode, I'm joined by my regular co-host, albeit she has been absent from me for a few episodes, Shannon Eastman from Teach a Brand to Fish. You can check her out at shannoneastman.com. And we chat about 2020, look back on the course of the year. She reminded me just before we recorded that we had released 2020 predictions way back in December 2019. So we have a little fun chatting about what those predictions said. The only one I could remember was the Brexit one, where we kind of said, ask me again in 6 months' time. And that's proved to be pretty much true. Beyond that, we look at some of the other things that we got up to in 2020, and we look forward then into 2021 as to what that might hold for us and for the industry generally. So listen, sit back, relax, enjoy, take a break from Christmas FM, and we look forward to having you on this episode of the podcast. Enjoy. Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Aquest Podcast with me, Danny Lawlor. If you're new to the Aquest Podcast, do hit the subscribe button on whatever your preferred podcast platform is. And if you like the podcast, do be sure to give it a thumbs up and let the world know. For this episode, this is our last episode of 2020, and thank goodness for that. I'm pretty much done with the year, and I think everybody else is as well. So we look forward to wrapping it up over the next couple of weeks and then jumping headlong into 2021 and what it might bring for us. For this episode, I'm joined by my regular co-host, Shannon Eastman from Teach a Brand to Fish. You can check her out at shannoneastman.com. And we look back at 2020. She reminds me that I did publish 2020 predictions way back in December 2019. So we have a bit of fun looking back on what I thought would happen in 2020 and see how right or wrong I was, but I sure didn't predict COVID-19. So after that, we take a little look at other things we got up to during the course of 2020. Some work we did with Sam Glynn and Bob Quinn. Look at the CP86 Minicon. And some trends that we've seen emerge over the course of the year that are likely to continue into 2021. So we chat about what 2021 might hold for us and also for the industry generally. There you go. Sit back, relax, enjoy, knock off Christmas FM for a few minutes. And thank you for joining us on the Aquest Podcast. Enjoy the show. Catch you the other side.
You've been listening to the Aquest Podcast. For information about our training and advisory programs or our academy, visit aquest.ie. For more resources on regs, funds, and governance, check out our YouTube channel, Daniel Lawlor, RU or Q.